European Union leaders are meeting in Luxembourg to discuss their response and to present a united front following President Trump's sweeping new tariffs on imports. The president's advisors have defended the policy, vowing to stay the course. In a series of television interviews, the U.S. Treasury Secretary played down recent stock market falls, and the Commerce Secretary insisted reciprocal tariffs would be implemented as planned. Well, countries have begun to roll out their responses. In Taiwan, the president announced that they'd be removing trade barriers in order to facilitate negotiations with the U.S. China has hit back, imposing 34% on U.S. imports and adding U.S. companies to its unreliable entities list. And all eyes are now on Europe. Germany and France want a tough response, but Spain and Italy disagree, fearing that retaliation could spark a bruising trade war.
Is how to position Europe in what I would describe as a paradigm shift of the global trading system. So I'm very glad that I would have the opportunity to inform and debrief my colleagues, the ministers, on the ongoing contacts with my American partners.
Well, for his assessment, I'm joined now on the line from London by the international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Dr. Laskiewicz, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just give us your assessment of how you think the EU is planning to respond as a bloc to these US tariffs.
Well, therein lies the problem. How do they respond as a bloc? For a start, to be very aggressive towards USA, as Germany and France are indicating, lacks a certain sense, because actually it's Europe which has a trade surplus with America. And please note, China's response is actually by no means good for it, because at the end of the day, China risked losing the whole of the trade surplus by means of a war and much trade besides. So therefore, Europe probably won't go down the route of aggression, as Spain and Italy are urging them not to do so. The result will be a muted response of some sort, and this muted response will result in America, of course, treating Europe with a fair amount of disdain because it hasn't fought back, and therefore the assumption is that they can do what they like. The central problem with Europe, as indeed with China, is that they have an opportunity to negotiate with President Donald Trump because he is a businessman and likes his deals. And this they're failing to do. They're regarding it as a war, whereas actually it is in many ways for President Donald Trump an opening of a negotiation. And if they do choose to go for war, the loser will be Europe, like China, because at the end of the day, what President Donald Trump wants is this trade surplus to disappear. And if that occurs by means of a trade war, so be it for him. As far as he's concerned, not a problem at all.
That's very interesting. And just to further dissect what you've been saying there, I mean, in effect, the options on the table are, some have said, to the Europeans, don't use the panic button, and others are sort of torn between aligning either with the US or with the EU.
Yes, the central problem confronting them is that they're not really a unified body. And as stated by yourself and myself, there are two schools of thought. If they go the route of France and Germany for a confrontation, the trade surplus goes. If, on the other hand, they go to the route of Spain and Italy of being conciliatory, they'll be treated with a fair amount of disdain, and it will be quite obvious that Trump has won. Actually, the solution, as I've stated, is for them to negotiate with President Donald Trump, because he is open to negotiation. And this is the key point. The negotiations are, of course, about not just trade tariffs, but also non-trade barriers. Please note, both exist in Europe, as they do indeed in America. The fact of the matter is the Europeans are by no means saints. They have tariffs as well, please note. And as for non-trade barriers, well, the Americans have them as much as the Europeans. There could be indeed scope for negotiation. What isn't going to be helped is by means of direct aggressive counter-talk, the sort that China has surprisingly decided to opt for, And if Europe goes the same way, then as I've stated, a trade war just plays into Donald Trump's hands.
So, I mean, as you said there, the Italians and the Spaniards are warning against retaliation while the French and the Germans are calling for it. I mean, if a trade war escalates, just going beyond seeing Europe as a bloc to sort of individual countries, who stands to lose more in Europe? We know that Italy, for instance, is a strong trading economy, trading over a third of its GDP. So if a trade war escalates, they're going to lose more than other countries.
Yes, indeed. There is this aspect. There is a second aspect as well. A trade war is a step from saying not only is NATO dead now, but actually saying that America and Europe are no longer together. There is more than just economics at stake here. There's the political side, the military side as well. And so Italy, by being conciliatory, would be a good idea if all these points were borne in mind. Moreover, in a trade war, not only does trade go down in the sense of there's no trade surplus, but trade goes down in absolute terms. And so if you're a trading company like Italy, yes, it will lose out, of course. Please note, America doesn't need to trade as much. America's like Russia or China, come to that. When you're a huge country, you really do have everything you need internally, and it's those extra bits which you bring in from abroad. And therefore, in that sense, if there were a trade war and America merely from now on indulges in trade between its states as opposed to going outside the US, that's fine by Donald Trump. That's exactly the sort of thing he's looking for. So the losers will be some countries in Europe especially, Europe as a whole, because that's where its trade surplus is, and not only economic, but maybe militarily and politically too.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because a lot of American economists are saying something to the contrary. I mean, the suggestion is that it's rather peculiar that we have a situation where one single country is attacking dozens of others with tariffs. And the question is, how much is that likely to inform the response? I mean, because these US tariffs are hitting their own US stock markets, and they appear to be self-damaging on a massive scale. So anything that's made in the US now is going to be 20% more expensive to produce. So some have suggested, you know, just leaving Europe, for example, leaving the US for 6 months, they'll fall into a recession, and then they'll roll back on all these tariffs by themselves. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, one of the problems you have here is that there's only one side of the analysis being presented by economists who are academics or in the media throughout the West. It's very important to realize that the Western media also has its own axis to grind. And therefore, in this respect, a fuller picture must be presented. You have to distinguish between the short term, where indeed some prices go up because demand is inelastic and the tariffs have to be paid, with the medium term, where local substitutions are made. Now, America is running a trade imbalance, and so were that to disappear and America only to trade within itself, even if the net amount of goods went down, there would still be the goods on the shelves. Moreover, as American alternatives appear, it employs more American workers. Sure, overall, the Americans are worse off in the sense that it's better to have a cheaper foreign product in the real sense of the word, without any tariffs, say it was free trade, than a more expensive American one. But it must be remembered that this is not actually the situation confronting Donald Trump in America. It's a persistent trade imbalance. There are tariffs against the USA, and he's resolved to do something against them. Please note, America used to have sky-high tariffs. And please note, there is nothing unusual about implementing a tariffs policy. This was done all the way back from the 19th century under the Friedrich List, the German economist, which is how Germany built up its industries. Moreover, mercantilist economics has been around for centuries. It is not that new. It is not that an Armageddon-ish. It simply means that there is a net loss of a standard of living for consumers, but on the other hand, the American manufacturing industry and other industries will benefit. So it depends on the equation and how it looks like to Donald Trump. A worse situation is rather that his tariffs that he's implementing are far worse than many of the others that he's complaining about. And in this sense, he has gone too far. But even that could be a negotiating ploy because he is a businessman and simply starting off at a high price, prepared to be beaten down. So the net effect of this is it is not so. However, to go now to the stock market gets the jitters because it reads the media. And there are two aspects to this. First of all is believing that what the academics say, that their prices will go up forever and ever, which is untrue, as I've said, because local substitutes or foreign ones investing directly in America to make the manufactured goods there under the tariff wall, as Donald Trump has said. But secondly, Donald Trump is a victim of his own policy making, just as Great Britain was after Brexit. This is the letter I wrote to the Financial Times, by the way, which Boris Johnson may well have been referring to. It's the uncertainty. The one reason why American business is jittery on top of whatever Donald Trump is saying is because there's no clear-cut guide what's going to happen. You can't invest when you've no idea what the tariffs will be. If he had said 25% from now till doomsday, you can plan on that. If he had said no tariffs, but we're in a situation we have no idea whether the tariffs will go ahead, when they'll go ahead, because he is now talking about a 90-day moratorium, about negotiations, and all this is so uncertain that American business has no idea where it's going, and not just American business. No business in the world knows. Therefore, from that point of view, the uncertainty is a hidden feature, hidden because, so far as I know, you are the first people here to hear of this.
Well, that's actually a very good point. And just to point out that the White House has come out to say that they're not planning a 90-day moratorium. But I mean, just very quickly, you may have touched on this earlier, Dr. Laskiewicz, so I hope I'm not making you repeat yourself. But some Europeans have suggested that they're actually in a strong position because they can join forces with many countries around the world. I mean, do you think that is the way things might go, unity and power against the US, or is it more about running the world economy the way it has been run, which is through dialogue and economic exchanges?
Yeah, good question. But first of all, about the 90 days, you said the White House has just denied this. It's precisely this sort of uncertainty which is unsettling the markets, because it was stated, apparently, by including by some eminences, Greece of Donald Trump, and now, as you said, it's been withdrawn, and for all we know, it might come back on the menu again. That's the sort of thing I'm referring to by uncertainty. But to come back to your real question, there is indeed a possibility of a huge shift in how the world economy is run, but for a different reason. Donald Trump has abrogated, he's left, he's resigned, he's no longer the leader of the West. He did that when he stepped out of line, abandoned NATO, which was actually little more than a support system for the Americans, and now America is simply yet another country, stronger, bigger, richer, sure, but just another country. In that point of view, it's true, Europe could very well, or for that matter China or other countries, actually deal more with other countries than just with the United States. There are, of course, 2 points to make straight away. This is precisely what China and Russia have wanted, a multipolar world, as opposed to a unipolar world dominated by USA, whom the French some time ago accused of now being a hyperpower as opposed to a superpower. But secondly, the point is this possible? You see, America is very rich, and therefore, to a degree, cannot be ignored. So the shift will not be enormous, but some sort of shift will occur, yes, simply because goods are being made and ideally would like to go to a home somewhere. And so therefore what I'm saying is that there's an urge on side of many countries to have commerce, and I do expect as a result to be pattern of trade to be altered away from America to some extent as a result of Donald Trump, yes.
And of course, as we wait for the Europeans at this meeting in Luxembourg to see how muscular their reaction might be, in that multipolar world that you were talking about, Would it be fair to say that the point is that if a trade war escalates, it's going to lead to a global recession and no one's going to be safe anyway?
It will lead to a global recession, yes, because the sheer volume of trade will fall. That is clear. It seems very hard to avoid now, because if China's gone for retaliatory tariffs of 34%, then it's all the amount of Chinese American trade will fall in absolute numbers. And to that extent, there will be a recession. No one is safe from a recession when it's the titans on the world stage that are fighting. So in other words, yes, it will be felt all around the place, including, of course, in Africa or South America, as much as anywhere else. So therefore, I don't think that's possible to avoid. The point is that if we're going to go to a world which is more autarkic, where each nation looks after its own demand, as indeed Donald Trump is, I think, is more interested in, the trade imbalances being somewhat of an excuse, although they're real in their own terms, then in that case, there would be in any case a world recession, because the volume of trade overall goes down. However, I anticipate it not being a total depression, because too many countries are interested in trading amongst themselves. I do think there will be negotiations with Donald Trump to lower some of the tariffs, and therefore there will be perhaps a recession. I think yes, but not a depression.
Sterling stuff, as always. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. He is the International Affairs Analyst, and he was talking to me on the line there from London.